The aging German shepherd caught the former Navy SEAL's sleeve in his teeth and pulled toward a flooded culvert beneath the coastal road. The man tightened the support sling under the dog's failing hips, unsure whether to follow or carry him back to the workshop. Then faint scratching rose beneath the grate, nearly swallowed by rushing water, while the old shepherd fixed his attention on the darkness. The dog was not wandering in confusion. He had heard something alive trapped where the incoming tide was already beginning to climb. Every step strained his weak heart, yet turning back could leave another life below the road, forcing the man toward the choice he feared most. When two small eyes flashed inside the pipe, the shepherd touched his nose to the man's hand as if saying, "Now it's yours." Where are you watching from today? Stay with us until the end, then tell us what this story meant to you. Please like, share, and subscribe as we work toward welcoming our first 1,000 subscribers. Owen Mercer was 62, a retired Navy SEAL who now repaired marine engines on Whidbey Island, and this was supposed to be a 5-minute walk before the rain returned. Ranger, his nearly 14-year-old German shepherd, needed the exercise but no longer had the strength for much of it. Owen's only goal was to get the old dog outside, let him finish, and bring him back to the warm pad beside the workshop stove. Instead, Ranger stopped at the north door, lifted his silvered muzzle toward the road, and refused to move in either direction. "Not today," Owen said. Ranger's hind legs were already trembling inside the support sling Owen held beneath his hips. The dog had heart disease, advanced arthritis, and strict instructions from Dr. Lena Ortiz. Short walks, level ground, no unnecessary strain. Beyond the workshop, 50 yards of wet gravel sloped toward a drainage channel near the tidal flats. Ranger leaned forward. Owen tightened the sling. "You heard the doctor." The shepherd turned his amber eyes toward him, then caught the cuff of Owen's camouflage shirt between his teeth. He did not pull hard. He did not bark. He pressed once and looked toward the road. Owen went still. Years earlier, before Ranger's muzzle had turned white and his left ear had begun to sag around its small triangular notch, that silent signal had meant only one thing: follow me and keep quiet. A faint sound slipped beneath the wind. Scratch. Pause. Scratch again. Owen looked past Ranger toward the culvert beneath the low coastal road. Heavy rain had fallen through the night, and the morning tide was pushing dark water backward through the drainage channel. The sound came from the inland opening, where reeds and wet branches had gathered against an iron grate. Ranger pulled again. "All right." Owen did not like the answer, but the decision had already been made. He guided Ranger across the gravel, carrying part of the dog's weight through the sling. Owen was tall and broad-shouldered, but the strength in his frame came less from a gym than from 40 years of boats, tools, salt air, and work that resisted being hurried. His brown hair had gone gray at the temples. A thick salt and pepper stubble covered his jaw. His nose bent slightly left from an old break, and his bright gray eyes narrowed whenever he was calculating distance. Today, they measured every step Ranger took. The dog stopped twice before reaching the ditch. Each time, Owen waited without urging him forward. Ranger's right hind leg shook hardest, but his head remained fixed on the culvert. At the grate, the scratching stopped. Owen crouched. Cold water moved beneath the road in slow, rising pulses. He smelled mud, salt, wet wood, and dog. Then came a thin whine from inside the pipe. Ranger lowered himself awkwardly beside the opening. His breathing was fast now. "You found it," Owen said. "Your part is done." Ranger did not appear convinced. Owen ran back to the service truck parked beside the workshop and returned with a flashlight, a socket wrench, a boat hook, and an old wool blanket. He had spent the last 12 years repairing outboard motors, generators, winches, and whatever else island weather tried to destroy. None of that made him a rescue expert in flooded culverts. It did mean he understood rusted bolts, shifting water, and the danger of placing a human body where it could not turn around. He shone the flashlight through the grate. Two dark eyes reflected the beam. A puppy was wedged several feet inside, pressed against a ridge of gravel above the waterline. Pale yellow fur clung to its ribs. A dark stripe ran along its back. One ear stood upright, the other folded over at the tip. The animal tried to retreat when the light reached it, but something near its neck caught against a branch. Owen tested the grate. The lower bolts were rusted but not frozen. "Stay," he told Ranger. The old dog gave him a look that suggested the command was unnecessary. Owen removed the bolts one at a time. The grate shifted outward with a grinding sound, and the puppy panicked. Its paws slipped from the gravel shelf, splashing into the water. Ranger rose halfway before his legs failed. Owen caught the sling with one hand and steadied him. "Easy, I've got it." The words left his mouth before he could examine them. He had said them to injured men, to frightened civilians, to a volunteer rescuer shivering in the bottom of a disabled boat years after Owen left the Navy. Sometimes he had been right. Sometimes getting hold of one person had meant releasing another. The puppy whined again. Owen pushed the memory down and returned to the problem in front of him. He laid the wool blanket across the wet gravel beneath the pipe. Then he extended the boathook slowly, turning the curved end away from the puppy. The nylon strap attached to its collar was snagged around a broken branch. Owen lifted the branch first, easing the tension without pulling the animal's neck. The puppy snapped once at the hook, more frightened than aggressive. "That's fair," Owen said. "I'd object too." Ranger made a low sound in his chest. The puppy froze, not from fear. Its head turned toward the older dog's voice. Ranger remained beside Owen, weak and shaking, but steady enough to hold the puppy's attention. Owen slid the hook behind the loose strap and drew it forward several inches. The puppy resisted, then placed one paw onto the blanket. "Come on." Another pulse of water entered the culvert and washed over the puppy's back legs. Owen drew the blanket toward himself. The puppy scrambled forward, slipped, and came out in a wet, trembling heap. Owen wrapped the blanket around it immediately. The small body felt cold through the wool, but not rigid. The puppy kicked once, found no escape, and pressed its face against his chest. Ranger leaned forward and touched his nose to the wet fur. Only then did Owen feel how hard the old dog was breathing. The rescue had taken less than 10 minutes. It had cost Ranger nearly everything he had for the morning. Owen lifted the puppy under one arm and supported Ranger with the sling in the other. The walk back was slow. Ranger stopped 3 times, and on the final stretch, Owen had to lower the puppy onto the gravel, lift the shepherd's hindquarters fully, and move him forward one careful step at a time. There had been years when Ranger could clear a wall faster than most men could reach the door. In Owen's final period of military service, the two had worked as a canine team. Ranger had searched confined spaces, detected dangerous scents, and warned Owen about things human senses missed. After the dog retired, Owen had brought him home. Now Ranger needed help crossing 50 yards. Owen did not carry him completely. Ranger still resisted that indignity. Instead, they negotiated the distance together. Inside the workshop, Owen set the puppy in a wooden parts crate lined with dry towels. He moved the crate close to the stove, but not directly in front of it. Rapid heat after cold exposure could do more harm than good. He wrapped a warm water bottle in another towel and placed it beside the puppy's body. The animal shook so hard its teeth clicked. Owen examined the collar. It was plain blue fabric, damp and dirty. A short piece of gray nylon remained attached to its metal ring. The strap had torn at a stitched seam rather than being cut. Reflective thread ran along one edge. No tag, no telephone number, no answer. Ranger lowered himself beside the crate, his chest rising unevenly. "You're done for the day," Owen told him. Ranger rested his muzzle on the wooden edge. The puppy continued to tremble. Owen called Lena Ortiz. She arrived 25 minutes later in a navy waterproof coat, carrying her blue veterinary bag. At 55, Lena had the calm hands and direct gaze of someone who knew that reassurance was useful only when it remained honest. She examined Ranger first. "You exceeded his limit," she said. "He exceeded it." "You were holding the sling." Owen accepted the correction without argument. Lena listened to Ranger's heart, checked his gums, and waited for his breathing to settle. Then she turned to the puppy. The examination showed mild hypothermia, exhaustion, and hunger, but no broken bones or serious wounds. The puppy was female, approximately 4 months old. Lena scanned twice for a microchip. Nothing. "She was fortunate," Lena said. "Ranger heard her." Lena looked at the old shepherd resting beside the crate. Then she was fortunate twice. Owen called County Animal Control and reported where the puppy had been found. The officer on duty took the description, gave him a case number, and explained that the local shelter was already over capacity after the storm. If Owen was willing, he could sign temporary foster paperwork while they searched for an owner. "I'm not keeping her," Owen said. The puppy sneezed into the towel. Lena raised one eyebrow but did not comment. Owen completed the form because there was no practical alternative. He wrote his name, workshop address, and telephone number in the careful block letters he used on repair invoices. Temporary custody, 72-hour owner search, then review. No promises beyond that. The words should have made the responsibility feel smaller. They did not. By late afternoon, the rain had returned. Owen stood at his workbench in his faded green camouflage shirt, staring at 3 repair orders pinned above a tentative purchase offer for the workshop. Before winter ended, he intended to finish the jobs, accept the offer, and move into veterans' housing on the mainland. Ranger had been the one exception to the narrow life Owen had built after leaving the local Marine rescue team. The old dog had never asked why Owen stopped answering calls after the night a damaged rescue boat turned back with its crew alive, while a stranded fisherman remained beyond reach. Owen had made the correct decision. That had never made it feel clean. He looked toward the stove. The puppy lay in the crate, shaking less now. Ranger had moved closer until his shoulder touched the wood. His eyes remained open. Owen picked up the telephone to call the shelter again. Before he could dial, Ranger stretched his neck and laid his muzzle across the edge of the crate. The puppy shifted beneath the towel, found the warmth of his breath, and became still. Ranger waited until the trembling stopped. Then, at last, the old shepherd closed his eyes. Owen lowered the telephone without making the call. For the first time that morning, the workshop was quiet. It was not the quiet Owen had planned for. By the second morning, the puppy had recovered enough strength to become inconvenient. Owen discovered this when a steel socket rolled off his workbench and struck the concrete floor. The sharp clang sent the puppy scrambling backward beneath a cabinet, dragging a towel behind her. Ranger lifted his head from the padded mat beside the stove, but did not rise. Owen shut off the engine part he had been testing and waited until the workshop became quiet again. "Nothing's chasing you," he said. The puppy stared out from the shadows. Her left ear stood straight, while the right folded toward her cheek. She had eaten 3 small meals since Lena Ortiz's visit, slept through most of the night, and already seemed determined to make up for lost time. Owen had planned to finish rebuilding a damaged outboard motor before noon. Instead, he was lying on one knee, holding a piece of softened food near the floor. The puppy crept forward, seized it, and retreated. "Temporary," Owen reminded her. Ranger gave one slow thump of his tail. Owen looked at him. "That applies to your opinions, too." The old shepherd closed his eyes. Lena had left clear instructions taped beside the workshop telephone. The puppy needed small meals, warmth, rest, and no unnecessary excitement until her follow-up visit. Ranger's instructions were stricter. His heart medication had been adjusted, and he was not to walk beyond the gravel area directly outside the north door. Owen had nodded while Lena explained it. He had spent enough years around military dogs to recognize pain, fatigue, and changes in breathing. What he did not possess was a veterinary degree, a question Lena had stated without raising her voice. "You know Ranger better than anyone," she had told him. "That does not mean you get to overrule his heart." The sentence stayed on the wall with the instructions. Owen returned to the workbench and restarted the engine. The puppy emerged from beneath the cabinet, watched the moving belt for several seconds, then wandered toward Ranger's water bowl. "Not yours." She placed both front paws in it. Water spread across the concrete. Owen switched the engine off again. Ranger opened one amber eye. "You could help," Owen said. Ranger looked at the puppy standing ankle-deep in the bowl and appeared to decide that experience was the more effective teacher. Owen lifted her out, dried her paws, and found a shallow metal dish. The moment he set food inside it, the puppy lunged forward and swallowed so quickly that she began coughing. Ranger raised his head and gave a low, controlled rumble. The puppy froze with her nose still inside the dish. Ranger held her gaze. After several seconds, she took one careful bite. Owen leaned against the workbench. The old dog had once controlled rooms full of noise and movement without wasting a bark. Age had reduced his speed, but not his sense of order. "Apparently you've been promoted," Owen said. Ranger settled his head back down. The puppy ate slowly for almost half a minute before forgetting the lesson and diving into the bowl again. Ranger rumbled once more. This time she corrected herself without looking up. Owen had not intended to name her. Names created habits, and habits made departures harder. He had referred to her as the pup, you, and once, after she chewed the corner of a repair invoice, small criminal. By mid-morning, the Animal Control Office called to say no matching owner report had been found. The shelter still had no open kennel. The officer asked whether Owen could continue fostering her through the 72-hour search period. Owen looked toward the stove. The puppy had fallen asleep with her body pressed against Ranger's front legs. Ranger had shifted slightly to make room without waking her. "I can manage until the review," Owen said. After ending the call, he wrote the case number on the workshop calendar. In the square beneath it, he added feeding times and the date of Lena's follow-up appointment. He stared at what he had written. Then he added a name. Pip. The word was short enough to sound temporary. When he said it aloud, the puppy woke immediately. "That proves nothing." Pip stumbled to her feet and ran toward him. Halfway across the floor, a loose chain hanging from a hoist knocked against the metal frame. She changed direction so quickly that her rear leg slid out from under her. Ranger rose. The effort came in stages. First his front legs, then his hips, with the right hind leg trembling beneath him. Before Owen could intervene, Ranger stepped between Pip and the hanging chain. He did not approach the noise. He placed his body across Pip's path and waited. Pip tried to move around him. Ranger shifted with her. She stopped. Only then did Ranger turn his head toward the chain, look back at Owen, and touch his nose to the back of Owen's hand. Owen followed the gesture and secured the loose chain to the wall. Ranger returned to his mat. Pip watched the whole exchange. Later, when the air compressor coughed to life in the back corner, Pip ran to Owen and struck her nose against his knee. Then she spun toward the noise with such enthusiasm that she nearly fell again. Owen looked at Ranger. The old shepherd's left ear leaned sideways. His expression held no visible pride. "Your student lacks restraint." Pip barked once at the compressor. Ranger sighed. The chapter's first real interruption arrived shortly after noon in the form of a yellow raincoat moving past the workshop window. Mabel Cross entered without knocking, carrying a folded wire crate against one hip. At 72, she had the sturdy build of someone who had spent decades lifting boxes before anyone could offer help. Her gray hair was braided low beneath a brown knit cap, and a wooden fish hung from the large ring of keys clipped to her coat. "I heard you found trouble in a drain pipe," she said. "Information travels fast here." "Only when you try to hide it." She set the crate on the floor. Pip immediately ran toward the sound, noticed the metal, and stopped so abruptly that her paws spread wide. Mabel lowered the crate carefully rather than letting it strike the concrete. That her? For now. Pip approached Mabel, sniffed one rubber boot, and retreated behind Ranger. Mabel looked at the old shepherd. Her voice softened, though not enough to become pity. "Morning, Ranger." Ranger lifted his head but stayed down. She had known him since Owen first brought him to the island. Mabel had never asked for stories about his work, and Ranger had rewarded that restraint by tolerating her hands near his ears. "The shelter loaned you that?" Owen asked. "This belonged to my sister's beagle." The beagle believed confinement was a personal insult, so it's barely used. "I didn't ask for a crate." "No, that's what made it possible to bring one." Owen folded his arms. His faded camouflage shirt had a dark smear of grease across one sleeve, and the pencil behind his right ear had left graphite near his temple. "I'll return it when animal control places her." Mabel glanced at the feeding schedule taped beside the telephone, then at the name written on the calendar. "Pip?" It's easier than saying "the dog" 20 times a day. "Of course." Owen did not care for the amount of understanding in her tone. Mabel opened the crate and placed a towel inside. Pip watched from behind Ranger's shoulder. Ranger turned his head, looked into the crate, then looked at Pip. The puppy took one step forward. Mabel remained still. Pip entered, sniffed the towel, and came out again. She repeated the process twice before sitting in the doorway. "There," Mabel said. "No speeches required. I wasn't planning one. You plan everything." Owen returned to the outboard motor. "That's how engines get repaired. That's also how people end up believing no one else can hold a wrench." The words landed near an old irritation. Owen adjusted the carburetor without answering. Mabel walked to Ranger and crouched carefully. "How long can he be left alone now?" "He's not left alone." "You still make service calls?" "Short ones." "And the puppy's next appointment?" "I'll take her." "Who stays with Ranger?" Owen's hand stopped on the wrench. Mabel did not smile. She had not asked to win an argument. She had asked because the answer mattered. "I'll arrange it," he said. "You're arranging it now." She held out her hand. Owen stared at it. Mabel waited. From the stove, Pip attempted to climb over Ranger rather than walk around him. Ranger raised one front leg and placed it gently across her path. Pip backed up, considered the obstacle, then circled his body properly. Owen removed a spare workshop key from the drawer. The ring was plain steel, without a label. He placed it in Mabel's palm. "Only for veterinary appointments or emergencies." "I'll try not to throw a parade." "This is temporary." "So is weather. Still pays to own a coat." She clipped the key beside the wooden fish and stood. It was a small exchange. Owen knew that. Yet the empty place in the drawer bothered him more than it should have. A key meant access. Access meant someone could enter when he was absent, see what had gone unfinished, and notice what he could no longer manage alone. He turned back to the engine before Mabel could study his face. Over the next 3 days, Pip began to fit herself into the workshop's routine. She slept during the loudest repairs, provided Owen started the machinery before she settled. She learned that Ranger's food bowl was not hers. She learned that crossing directly in front of Owen while he carried tools resulted in Ranger blocking her with one shoulder. She also began copying Ranger's alert behavior with unreliable enthusiasm. A wrench dropped. Pip touched Owen's boot and stared at the floor. The north door rattled in the wind. She struck her nose against his hand and ran to the stove. A delivery driver sounded his horn. Pip touched Ranger instead, then looked confused when the old dog refused to investigate. Ranger corrected her without impatience. He watched, waited, and responded only when a sound deserved attention. Pip began to pause before reacting, though the pause rarely lasted more than 2 seconds. Owen found himself working in shorter intervals. He adjusted Ranger's medication, divided Pip's meals, cleaned accidents, and still finished the outboard motor before the customer's deadline. The schedule became less efficient and more alive. He disliked both facts. On the fourth afternoon, the rain eased. A white shuttle bus climbed the road above the workshop, moving slowly toward the assisted living residence on the far side of the hill. Pip had been chewing a rope toy near the crate. The moment the bus appeared through the window, she dropped the rope. Her body changed before she made a sound. Her ears lifted unevenly. She stood, stared, then ran to the north door and released a low whine. Owen looked up from the generator panel he was testing. The bus disappeared around the bend. Pip remained at the door. Ranger raised his head from the mat and looked in the same direction. It happened again the following morning, then once more that evening when the shuttle returned with its interior lights glowing against the rain. Each time, Pip reacted before the engine reached the workshop. Each time, she hurried to the north door and watched the road long after the vehicle had passed. Ranger did not follow her, but his attention remained fixed on the hill. Owen stopped calling it nervousness. He opened the notebook where he recorded engine faults and repair measurements. Beneath a list of generator parts, he wrote 3 times and 3 brief observations. Shuttle northbound, whining, door. Shuttle southbound, same response, Ranger, attentive. Mabel arrived the next morning carrying a bag of groceries and found Owen inspecting Pip's collar beneath the work lamp. "What did she break?" she asked. "Nothing." "That must be disappointing." Owen turned the blue collar between his fingers. The remaining gray strap was narrow, padded on one side and sewn with reflective thread. Its torn edge showed a reinforced box stitch. Mabel set the bag down. Her expression changed. "Hold that still," Owen did. She moved closer and touched the strap with one finger. Her husband had needed portable oxygen during the final 2 years of his life. Mabel had repaired and replaced more medical bag straps than she cared to remember. "That isn't a leash," she said. Owen looked at her. "It's from a portable oxygen carrier, shoulder strap most likely. See that padding and the reflective stitch? I used to order the same kind for Frank." Pip stood beside Ranger, watching them both. Outside, another shuttle bus climbed the road toward the hill. Pip turned before it came into view. This time Owen was already watching her. The torn strap changed Owen's question. Until that morning, he had been trying to learn who might have left a puppy near the tidal flats. Now he needed to know why a dog wearing part of an oxygen bag strap had been running toward the assisted living residence above the workshop. He placed Pip's blue collar in his coat pocket, left Mabel with both dogs, and returned to the drainage channel while the ground was still hard from the night's freeze. "You're not taking Ranger," Mabel said. Owen pulled on his olive canvas coat. "I hadn't planned to." "You looked at him twice." Ranger lay beside the stove, his pale amber eyes open. Pip sat near his front paws, watching Owen lace his brown work boots. "He stays here," Owen said. "That is what I just told you." Mabel wore her old mustard raincoat over a thick oatmeal sweater. The spare workshop key hung beside the wooden fish on her keyring. She had possessed it less than a week and already used it as if she had been issued authority by the county. Owen ignored that thought and went outside. The rain had washed away most of the obvious signs near the culvert, but the inland bank lay beneath alder branches that had protected parts of the ground. Owen found 2 small paw impressions pressed into frozen mud above the ditch. Farther uphill, the soil had been scraped where an animal had tried to climb. The marks did not prove where Pip belonged. They did show she had come down the slope rather than from the road. Owen followed the narrow maintenance path toward the ridge. It ran behind a cedar fence separating the assisted living property from a strip of wet woodland. Near one leaning post, a small piece of gray fabric remained caught beneath a splinter. He removed Pip's collar from his pocket. The fabric matched the torn strap in color, weave, and reflective stitching. One end on the collar had failed at a box-shaped seam. The strand on the fence carried loose thread from the same kind of break. Owen stood still, reconstructing only what the ground allowed. Pip had likely moved along the fence. The strap had snagged. She had pulled hard enough to tear it, then gone down the muddy slope toward the drainage channel. Whether she had been running away from the residence or trying to return to it remained unknown. That distinction mattered. Owen had spent too many years watching people turn assumptions into decisions because certainty sounded cleaner than doubt. He put both pieces into separate paper envelopes from the truck, wrote the date and location on each, then drove up the hill. The residence was a broad, two-story building faced with pale cedar siding. Covered walkways connected its three wings, and large windows looked toward the water. Nothing about the place seemed secretive. A maintenance worker was clearing wet leaves from a drain. Two women in sweaters sat beneath a patio heater, arguing amiably over a crossword puzzle. The front desk called Dennis Hale. He arrived carrying a blue notebook marked with colored tabs. Dennis was 58, shorter than Owen, and built neatly rather than heavily. His steel-gray hair was combed to one side. His shirt cuffs were exact, and his rectangular glasses gave him the look of a man who preferred problems with printed procedures. "You're Mr. Mercer," Dennis said. "Owen. Dennis Hale. I manage the residence." Owen placed a photograph of Pip on the counter. "I found her below your north fence. She reacted to your shuttle 3 times. This strap came off a portable oxygen carrier." Dennis looked at the photograph, then at the paper envelope Owen held. His expression did not change much, but one hand settled over the cover of his notebook. "You have residents who use portable oxygen. I assume that. We also have visitors, home health workers, delivery drivers, and family members. Then let me ask around." Dennis removed his glasses and wiped them with a square of dark cloth. "No." The answer was calm enough to irritate Owen immediately. "A puppy nearly drowned 50 yards from your property. And you reported her to animal control?" "Yes." "Then the correct process is already underway." "The correct process doesn't know she came from your fence." Dennis put his glasses back on. "You believe she came from our fence. That is not the same thing." Owen felt his jaw tighten. Dennis noticed. He did not step back. "I cannot give a stranger access to residence or disclose who uses oxygen," he continued. "Many people here have spent years having decisions made around them. Privacy is not an inconvenience I waive because you arrive with a convincing theory. I'm not asking for medical files. You are asking to identify vulnerable residents by medical equipment." The phrase struck Owen as calculated, but Dennis was not wrong. Owen shifted his approach. "Do you allow dogs?" "We allow pets under a written policy." "Then check who registered a puppy." "We have no registered puppy matching that photograph." That answer came too quickly. "You already checked." Dennis paused before replying. "We had a recent pet compliance issue. That is all I can say." "Someone here lost her." "Possibly. And nobody reported it." "Not to me." Owen heard the distance Dennis placed between those sentences. It sounded like avoidance. "You know who she belongs to." "I know several incomplete facts. You know several different incomplete facts. Neither of us has earned the right to turn them into a person's name." Owen leaned one hand on the counter. Dennis did not raise his voice. "Mr. Mercer, if the dog's owner lives here, that person may already be frightened, embarrassed, or grieving. You walking door to door in a military coat will not improve the situation. It's a work coat. That distinction may matter more to you than to them." For one sharp second, Owen wanted to push past procedure simply because he had identified a problem and could not tolerate waiting while it remained unresolved. That instinct had once kept people alive. It had also taught him to confuse urgency with authority. He picked up the photograph. "I'll be back." "I assumed you would." When Owen returned to the workshop, Mabel was seated on an overturned bucket, drinking coffee from his dented blue thermos. Pip slept inside the open wire crate. Ranger remained on his mat, awake but quiet. "You used my cup," Owen said.
You left it where a person could reach it." He hung his coat by the door and explained what Dennis had said.
Mabel listened without interrupting. That alone should have warned him. When he finished, she took another drink. "Well?" "Well, what? Was he wrong?" "He knows something." "That was not my question." Owen removed the fabric envelopes from his pocket and set them on the workbench. "A dog was lost. Somebody failed to report it." "Maybe. Pip could have died." "Yes. And Dennis is protecting a rule." Mabel looked toward the crate. "Or protecting a person from a man who walks into a building and assumes he should be obeyed because his concern is sincere." Owen's eyes hardened. "You think I should do nothing?" "No. I think you should stop acting like the only two choices are taking command or abandoning the field." The words stayed between them. Pip woke and tried to exit the crate at speed. Ranger lifted one foreleg across the opening. The puppy stopped, backed up, and waited. Ranger lowered his paw only after she had settled. Mabel nodded toward them. "Even he gives her a chance to choose the right movement." Owen looked at Ranger. The old dog was not restraining Pip. He was shaping the space around her, then waiting. That difference was small. It was also exact. "What do you suggest?" Owen asked. Mabel set down the thermos. "A notice. No name, no room numbers, no mention of oxygen. Just a found dog safe in temporary care with animal control's case number. Anyone who recognizes her can contact the office or call you." "Dennis may refuse." "Then ask instead of ordering." Owen gave her a long look. "You'll survive," she said. Dennis did not agree immediately. He objected to displaying Owen's private number and insisted that responses go through the resident's office first. Owen objected to Dennis controlling the contact. Mabel, standing between them in her mustard coat, suggested they use the animal control case number and the workshop number together. The notice went up that afternoon. It contained one clear photograph of Pip sitting beside the crate, her uneven ears easy to recognize. Beneath it were 7 plain words: found, safe, female puppy, temporary foster care. No accusations, no demand for explanations. For 2 days, nobody called. Owen told himself this confirmed his suspicions. He worked through a generator repair, measured Ranger's medication, and took Pip outside on a short line behind the workshop. She continued reacting whenever the white shuttle passed, but he stopped interpreting the behavior aloud. On the 3rd morning, someone knocked on the workshop door. The knock was light but deliberate. Owen opened it to find a woman standing behind a burgundy 4-wheeled walker. She was 76, perhaps a little older in the cold. Her white hair was cut to her chin and held back on one side with a tortoiseshell clip. A clear oxygen tube crossed her cheeks. The small cylinder rested inside a fabric carrier secured beside the walker. "My name is Helen Ward," she said. "I believe you have my dog." Owen stepped aside. Pip was near the stove chewing the end of a rope. At the sound of Helen's voice, the puppy went still. For several seconds, she did nothing. Then her body lowered. She moved backward until her shoulder pressed against Ranger's chest. Helen gripped the walker handles. One thumb rubbed across a thin wedding band. "Pip," she said. The puppy whined. Owen expected her to run. Instead, Pip looked at Ranger. The old shepherd remained lying down. He did not push her forward or stand between her and the visitor. His breathing was slow, his gaze steady. Pip took one step, then another. Helen locked the walker's brakes and lowered herself carefully onto its seat. She did not reach out until Pip came close enough to touch her shoe. When the puppy finally placed her chin on Helen's knee, Helen closed her eyes. She did not cry. She rested one hand between Pip's uneven ears and said, "You still haven't fixed that ridiculous one." The folded ear twitched beneath her fingers. Owen asked for proof before allowing Helen to remove the dog from the workshop. Helen did not take offense.
She produced veterinary receipts, vaccination records, and several photographs on her phone. In one, Pip slept beneath a small kitchen table. In another, she sat beside Helen's walker wearing the same blue collar. The documents established ownership. They did not establish what should happen next. Helen explained that Pip had come from the final litter raised by a neighbor who died in the spring. After Helen's husband passed, she had taken the puppy because the apartment had become too quiet. "I thought I needed something young in the room," she said. "I failed to consider how quickly young things move." Pip had twice run across the path of Helen's walker.
Neither incident caused a serious fall, but one left Helen bruised against a cabinet. Under the resident's pet policy, Dennis required a behavior assessment, veterinary records, a care plan, and a backup caregiver. Helen had 30 days to meet the conditions or arrange another home. She had asked her nephew to take Pip to the shelter. "The crate door was not latched properly," Helen said. "She escaped when he stopped near the ridge." Her nephew searched and left an after-hours animal control message, but he reported the location where Pip left the vehicle, not where she eventually went. Then he delayed telling Helen the whole truth because he feared what the loss would do to her. "He was ashamed," Helen said. "People become foolish when they believe shame is a form of protection." Owen understood the sentence too quickly. He looked toward Pip, still leaning against Helen's knee. "She can stay here," he said. "I'll handle it until I find a safe arrangement." Helen's hand stopped moving. "You will handle it?" "Temporarily." "And what arrangement are you finding?" "One that won't put you on the floor." The silence changed. Helen straightened despite the oxygen tube and the weight of her own breathing. "She is my dog, Mr. Mercer." "I know." "No, you know where she sleeps tonight. That is not the same thing." Owen glanced at Ranger, perhaps expecting the dog to break the tension merely by being present. Ranger slowly rose onto his front legs. His hindquarters remained down. With visible effort, he leaned toward Helen and placed his silvered muzzle beneath her open hand. Helen looked at him. Ranger stayed there. Not pleading, not choosing sides, only holding the space steady. Helen's fingers moved over the notch in his left ear. "You're an old gentleman," she said softly. Ranger closed his eyes for one breath. Owen heard his own words again. "I'll handle it." The phrase had sounded practical when he said it. In Helen's face, he saw what it had taken from her. He pulled a chair away from the workbench and placed it near the stove. "Would you sit for a few minutes?" he asked. Helen studied him. "That is a request," Owen added. "It needs practice." "I've been told." She moved from the walker to the chair. Pip settled beside her, keeping one shoulder against Ranger. They did not solve the problem that morning. Helen still could not safely take Pip home. Owen still held temporary foster responsibility under the animal control case. Dennis's policy remained in force. Ranger remained sick, and none of them possessed an easy answer. But when Helen left, she carried copies of the foster paperwork, and Owen had her veterinary records on the workbench. They agreed that Pip would remain at the workshop for 48 more hours while Helen considered what she wanted, not what Owen, Dennis, or her nephew wanted for her. At the door, Helen stopped. "Do not make a plan for me before I return." Owen nodded once. She looked unconvinced. "I won't," he said. After the door closed, Pip stood at the north window and watched Helen move slowly toward the waiting shuttle. Owen did not call her away. For the first time since finding the puppy, he understood that keeping someone safe and keeping control were not always the same act. The harder work would be learning the difference. Owen went to see Helen the next morning without Pip. He carried a yellow legal pad, a copy of the temporary foster form, and no plan he had already decided for her. That last part took the most effort. Helen received him in a small sitting room near the front of the residence. Rain moved softly against the windows.
She wore a blue-gray cardigan over a cream blouse, and her burgundy walker stood within reach. The portable oxygen carrier rested beside it, secured so the strap could not catch beneath the wheels. "You came alone," she said. "Pip is with Mabel. And Ranger?" "Sleeping." Helen pointed to the chair across from her. "Then sit down and tell me why you're here." Owen remained standing for a moment, his navy coat still buttoned. He had rehearsed several openings during the drive uphill. All of them sounded like instructions. He removed the coat and sat. "I spoke as if Pip's future belonged to me," he said. "It doesn't." Helen waited.
"I was trying to keep you from getting hurt."
"That explains it. It does not excuse it." "No." The answer seemed to satisfy her more than another defense would have. Owen placed the foster form on the table but did not push it toward her. "Animal control says Pip can remain with me while we work out a safe arrangement. You remain the legal owner. You can end the placement. You can also reject anything I suggest." "Anything?" "I'm practicing." Helen's mouth moved at one corner, not quite a smile. They began with what she wanted. Helen wanted Pip back in her apartment, but not at the cost of another fall. She did not want the puppy sent to a stranger before they had tested whether training and support could work. She also did not want Owen to become the only person capable of controlling the dog. "That would only replace one dependency with another," she said. Owen wrote the sentence down. Helen noticed. "You don't need to record every word. I remember better when I write. You remember orders. This is a conversation." He set the pencil down. By the time Dennis joined them, the outline belonged to all three of them. The residents would allow a 12-week evaluation period. Pip would continue living at Owen's workshop while Helen participated in 3 training sessions each week. The goals would be limited and measurable. Pip did not need to become a service dog. She needed to move safely around Helen's walker, avoid the oxygen tubing, stop at doors, return when called, and seek a nearby person when Helen gave a practiced signal. Dennis reviewed the page through his rectangular glasses. "This needs a veterinarian's clearance," he said, "and a backup care plan." "We haven't started yet," Owen replied. "That is why I'm asking before you start." Helen leaned back in her chair. "He's right." Owen looked at her. "I did not say I enjoy that," she added. "I said he's right." Dennis marked 2 lines in his blue notebook. "I also want progress records, dates, behaviors practiced, and any near falls." "You want incident reports for a puppy stepping wrong?" "I want facts before I'm asked to approve her return." The 2 men held each other's gaze until Helen reached for her oxygen tube and adjusted it beneath her chin. "Gentlemen," she said, "I have limited breath. Please do not spend all of it for me." The argument ended there. Lena Ortiz examined Pip 2 days later at the veterinary clinic. Pip had gained weight, her lungs were clear, and the cold exposure had left no lasting problem. Lena completed the next vaccinations and watched the puppy move on a short leash. Pip walked 3 reasonable steps, saw a rolling stool, and attempted to investigate it at full speed. Owen stopped her with the leash. Lena looked at him. "That is not a failure." "I didn't say it was. Your face did." She signed the health clearance but added conditions. Training sessions had to remain short. Pip needed rest between them. Ranger could participate only for a few minutes at a time, and only if his breathing and balance remained stable. "He is not equipment," Lena said. "I know." "Then don't use him like a demonstration model." Owen folded the clearance into his coat pocket. The first training session took place at the workshop on a Monday morning. Mabel drove Helen down in her old station wagon and announced that anyone who complained about her parking could move the puddles themselves. Owen had cleared a wide lane across the concrete floor. He used rubber mats to create traction and placed 2 empty crates as markers. A wooden board served as a practice threshold. The workshop looked less like a training facility than a repair shop attempting to behave politely. Helen locked the brakes on her walker. "What comes first?" she asked. "Pip learns where to stand." "Beside me?" "Beside the walker."
She has to respect the equipment before she understands the person using it. Helen looked at him. Careful. Owen corrected himself. She has to learn where you want her. That's better. Pip's first effort lasted 4 seconds. She stood near Helen's left side, accepted a piece of food, then circled behind the walker and tangled the leash around one wheel. Owen stepped forward. Helen raised one hand. Let me. Pip pulled toward Ranger's mat. Helen loosened the leash instead of tightening it, waited for the puppy to look back, then tapped twice on the walker handle. Pip returned. Good, Helen said. The puppy sat crookedly, one pale paw resting against a wheel. Owen had planned to correct the position. He did not. Ranger watched from his mat beside the stove. His right hind leg trembled whenever he shifted, but his attention stayed on Pip. Near the end of the session, Owen brought him forward with the support sling. Ranger walked one slow pass beside Helen's walker. He did not crowd the wheels or cut across her path. His body remained parallel to hers, leaving a narrow but clear space. Pip watched from Mabel's hand. On the second pass, Pip was released to follow several feet behind. She tried to hurry past Ranger. The old shepherd moved one shoulder outward and quietly blocked her. Pip stopped. Ranger continued. The puppy fell into place. Helen's fingers tightened around the walker handles. She said nothing until both dogs reached the wooden threshold. Then Ranger stopped. Pip nearly ran into him, corrected, and stopped too. For the first time, the exercise looked less like control and more like possibility. Ranger managed only 2 passes. Owen returned him to the mat, checked his breathing, and ended his part of the session. Helen crouched as far as her lungs and knees allowed. "You still know how to make a point," she told him. Ranger rested his silvered muzzle against her knuckles. The following weeks refused to improve in a straight line. Pip learned to wait at the workshop door, then forgot the skill when a gull landed outside. She stopped circling the walker, but began trying to carry one of its brake cables in her mouth. She learned to leave the oxygen tubing alone, then stole Helen's handkerchief from the walker basket and paraded through the workshop as if she had captured a flag. Mabel kept the training log. Her handwriting leaned sharply to the right, and her comments were less clinical than Dennis preferred. Pip avoided left wheel 8 times. Tried to eat right wheel once. Progress. Dennis crossed out the final word and replaced it with mixed result. Mabel wrote it back in. Owen taught Pip to return to Helen using a short line and small food rewards. At first, the puppy returned only when Owen gave the cue. He had to stop standing beside Helen and move across the workshop so Pip would learn that Helen's voice mattered. The harder exercise was seeking help. Helen tapped twice on the walker handle and said, "Find Owen." At first, Pip only stared at her. Ranger provided the foundation. When a wrench dropped near the workbench, he touched his nose to Owen's hand and turned toward the sound, the same quiet alert he had used for years. Owen separated the behavior into small pieces. Pip received a reward for touching his hand, then for moving from Helen to Owen, then for returning to Helen afterward. No one pretended she understood an emergency. She was learning a sequence. One Thursday, Helen became frustrated during a walker exercise. Her breathing had been poor that morning, and Pip repeatedly crossed in front of her. Owen took the leash. "Reset," he said. He moved Pip into position, walked her around the walker, and completed the exercise cleanly. Helen watched him do it. When he offered the leash back, she did not take it. "You trained her to work with you," she said. "I showed her the movement. You showed both of us that you can do it faster." "That wasn't the point." "It was the result." Owen looked down at Pip, who sat perfectly beside his boot. Helen turned the walker toward the door. "Take me home, Mabel." Mabel did not intervene. She helped Helen into her coat and drove her away. The next session was scheduled for Monday. Owen spent the weekend considering 3 possible adjustments, 2 new leash arrangements, and a different reward schedule.
On Sunday evening, Mabel came into the workshop, read the notes, and tore the page in half. "You are improving the wrong person," she said. Owen looked at the torn paper. Those were training steps. They were Owen's steps. Ranger lay nearby with Pip asleep against his shoulder. The old dog no longer corrected every small movement. Sometimes he let Pip make the mistake, watched her notice it, and waited. On Monday, Owen placed the leash in Helen's hand and moved to the far side of the workshop. "I won't step in unless you ask," he said. Helen studied him. "You will want to." "Yes." "That may be useful for your character." The session took twice as long. Pip crossed the walker once, backed into a crate, and became distracted by Mabel opening a bag of treats. Helen rested when she needed to. She repeated the cue without raising her voice. On the final attempt, Pip walked beside the left wheel, stopped at the wooden threshold, and looked up at Helen. Helen gave her the reward. Owen remained across the room. That was the first session Dennis chose to observe. He arrived in his Navy technical jacket, carrying the blue notebook. He watched Pip complete the threshold exercise, avoid the oxygen tube, and find Mabel after Helen gave the practiced cue. Dennis did not congratulate anyone. "What happens if Ms. Cross is ill?" he asked. "I come," Owen said. "And if both of you are unavailable?" Owen's patience tightened. "How many layers do you need?" "As many as prevent Helen from losing the dog 2 months from now, because the plan depended on one retired man and one neighbor." Helen rested both hands on the walker. "He is right again." "This is becoming a habit," Owen said. "A distressing one." They revised the plan. Mabel agreed to serve as the primary backup caregiver. Owen became the second. Dennis would identify one approved pet care service on the island for emergencies when neither was available. Lena's clinic would keep the health records current. Helen would remain responsible for daily care and for reporting any change in her balance or breathing. The plan did not remove every risk. It distributed the risk honestly. By the 11th week, Pip could walk beside the walker for the length of the workshop, stop at the wooden threshold, ignore the oxygen tubing, and find either Owen or Mabel after Helen gave the signal. She still became distracted, her right ear still folded when she was tired. Once, she abandoned a perfect recall because Ranger sneezed. Dennis reviewed the log without smiling. Then he closed the notebook. "I'll authorize one supervised trial in Helen's apartment," he said. "Nurse present, you present, limited duration." Helen looked at Pip. Owen looked at Ranger. The old shepherd remained on his mat. He had taught the puppy what he could, but his breathing had grown heavier during the last week. Lena had already warned that he should not attend the trial. Dennis checked the date on the calendar. Thursday morning. Mabel glanced toward the workshop window. The trees above the road were already moving, though the air near the building remained still. "The forecast says the wind arrives Thursday," she said. Dennis opened his notebook again. "Then we follow the weather plan." Owen watched Pip settle beside Helen's walker without being told. For 12 weeks they had practiced in a room built for engines. Now they would find out whether the plan belonged to the workshop or to the life Helen was trying to keep. Thursday morning arrived, with the trees already bending toward the water. The supervised trial was scheduled for 10 o'clock at Helen Ward's apartment. Owen brought Pip up the hill in his truck, while Mabel stayed at the workshop with Ranger. The old shepherd had barely touched breakfast and had needed Owen's support sling just to reach the north door. Lena Ortiz had been clear. Ranger was not to leave the building. Owen disliked driving away from him. He disliked even more that staying would mean breaking a promise to Helen. At the residence, wind pressed rain against the windows in hard, uneven bursts. Owen wore a green and black flannel shirt beneath his short navy coat, olive canvas pants, and the brown work boots he used around wet docks. Pip wore her blue collar and the short olive leash Helen had practiced with for 12 weeks. The puppy stepped through the front doors, saw a housekeeping cart, and forgot nearly everything she had learned. Her body dropped low. Her right ear folded against her cheek. The cart's metal bucket shifted as a staff member pushed it across the tile, and Pip moved behind Owen's leg. He felt the leash tighten. His first instinct was to guide her forward. Instead, he handed the leash to Helen. Helen stood behind her burgundy walker, portable oxygen secured to one side. She wore a soft gray-green sweater and dark slacks. The clear oxygen line crossed her cheeks, but her voice remained firm. "Pip?" The puppy looked at her. Helen tapped twice on the walker handle. Pip had heard that signal hundreds of times in the workshop. Here, surrounded by unfamiliar smells and rolling wheels, it took several seconds for the meaning to return. She stepped out from behind Owen, one step, then another. Helen rewarded her near the left wheel. Owen remained quiet. Dennis Hale watched from the hallway in his Navy technical jacket, the blue notebook tucked beneath one arm. Beside him stood the nurse assigned to the morning shift, a broad-shouldered woman in blue scrubs and gray walking shoes. She had already checked Helen's portable cylinder and confirmed that a second backup cylinder was stored inside the apartment. "The backup generator was tested Tuesday," Dennis said. "If the power fails, essential circuits transfer automatically." Owen glanced toward the windows. A branch scraped along the cedar siding. "That forecast has worsened," he said. Dennis followed his gaze. "We are operating under the wind plan." It was not a defensive answer. It was information. Owen nodded once. The trial began in the apartment, not the hallway. Helen guided Pip from the sitting area to the kitchen, stopped at the bedroom threshold, then turned back toward the front door. Pip stayed near the walker for most of the route. Twice she drifted toward Owen. Helen corrected her with the leash and voice before he moved. At the kitchen entrance, Pip stepped across the path of the left wheel. Helen stopped immediately. She did not pull the leash or raise her voice. She waited. Pip looked up. Helen tapped the handle. The puppy backed away and returned to position. Dennis wrote something in the notebook. Owen tried not to wonder whether it was approval or another condition. The nurse asked Helen how her breathing felt. "Like I'm being interviewed by weather," Helen replied. "Any dizziness?" "No." The nurse checked the oxygen tubing where it ran from Helen's face to the portable unit. Pip watched the movement but did not touch the line. "Good," Owen said before he could stop himself. Helen looked at him. He held up both hands. "Observation, not instruction. Progress," she said. They moved into the hallway for the next portion. The corridor was narrower than the practice lane at the workshop. A handrail ran along one wall. Doors opened and closed without warning. A resident using a cane passed them, followed by a staff member carrying folded towels. Pip's attention moved with every sound. She did not pull. That mattered more than perfect focus. Halfway to the common room, a door closer released with a heavy metallic click. Pip startled and swung toward Owen. The leash brushed one wheel of Helen's walker. Helen stopped. Owen waited. Pip took a breath, looked at Helen, and moved back to the left side. Dennis stopped writing. For the first time that morning, he watched the dog rather than the form in his hands. They reached the common room just as the first lights flickered. The ceiling fixtures dimmed, brightened, then went dark. A television shut off mid-sentence. Someone near the windows said, "There it goes." Emergency lighting came on along the baseboards. For half a second, the building held the strange silence that follows the loss of electricity. Then the generator started somewhere outside, its low diesel rumble rising beneath the wind. Several lights returned. The nurse looked at Helen. "We're transferring." The oxygen concentrator in Helen's apartment gave a distant alarm as its power source changed. The sound carried faintly through the open hallway. 3 electronic tones, a pause, then 3 more. Pip's head snapped toward it. Her body stiffened. Owen saw the old fear of sudden noise move through her. At the workshop, she might once have run beneath a cabinet. Helen tapped the walker handle. "Pip?" The puppy looked at her. The alarm sounded again. Pip touched her nose to the back of Helen's hand. Then she turned toward the doorway. For 1 second, she remained still, caught between the strange building and the sequence they had practiced. Helen gave the cue. "Find Owen." Pip moved. She crossed the short distance to him and pressed her nose against his hand hard enough to bend one finger backward. Then she turned toward Helen. It was not elegant, it was correct. Owen crouched but did not reward her himself.
Back to Helen. Pip returned and stood beside the walker. The nurse had already reached for the portable cylinder. She checked the gauge, confirmed flow, and disconnected the concentrator tubing according to procedure. "We're moving to the central room," she said. Helen nodded. "I can walk." "You can. I'm walking with you." Dennis used his radio to contact staff in the other wings. The generator had restored essential power, but residents using oxygen concentrators were to be checked and moved closer to the central nursing station until the transfer was confirmed stable. No one was panicking. That made the change in the air easier to miss. As they left the common room, Owen smelled diesel. At first it was faint. The residents had a generator running outside in a storm. Some odor near an exterior door was not surprising. Then another gust pressed against the building. The smell strengthened near the junction leading to the service corridor. Owen stopped.
Pip stopped because Helen stopped.
Dennis turned. "What is it?"
Owen looked toward a closed fire door marked "Staff Only." He knew engines. He knew what normal exhaust smelled like outside a repair bay, and what it smelled like when air carried it somewhere it did not belong. "Diesel exhaust," he said. "Stronger here than it should be." "The generator is on the north side," Dennis replied. "So is one of your exterior intakes." Dennis's expression changed, but he did not argue or announce a conclusion. "Are you saying we have carbon monoxide?" "I'm saying I smell exhaust. That needs to be checked." The difference mattered. Owen did not open the service door. He did not shut down the generator. Either action could create new problems in a building relying on emergency power. Dennis lifted the radio. "Move residents out of the north hallway and close the cross-corridor doors. Call the fire department. Maintenance to the generator intake, exterior approach only." The nurse turned Helen's walker toward the opposite wing. "We're going another way." Helen looked toward Owen. "Are you coming?" "Yes." Pip began to move too quickly, her shoulders pushing ahead of the walker. Helen slowed her with one word. "Beside." The puppy returned to position. Owen walked behind them, close enough to help but not touching the walker. Staff members guided residents from rooms nearest the service corridor. One man objected because he had just made coffee. Another resident refused to leave without her cardigan. The staff did not treat either concern as foolish. They brought the coffee and found the cardigan while continuing the move. Dennis remained at the junction, recording times between radio calls. Within minutes, the volunteer fire department arrived. 2 firefighters entered, wearing breathing equipment and carrying electronic air monitors. A third went outside with a maintenance worker to inspect the generator enclosure and nearby intake vents. Owen stayed with Helen near the central nursing station. He could hear radios, but not every word. Pip lay beside Helen's walker, tense but quiet. The sudden movement of people should have overwhelmed her. Instead, she watched Helen and occasionally looked toward Owen. Ranger would have ignored most of the noise. Pip did not ignore it. She simply remained where she had been asked to remain. The first firefighter returned from the north corridor. "We're getting elevated combustion readings near the service hall," she told Dennis. "Not dangerous in this section yet, but it's rising closer to the intake." "Source?" "Likely generator exhaust recirculation. Exterior crew is checking." A second radio report followed. Wet snow had accumulated in the sheltered area behind the generator enclosure. A broken tree limb had pushed against a windscreen near the secondary intake. The combination altered the air path, allowing exhaust to collect and draw toward the building. The maintenance worker closed the affected intake from an exterior control and opened the alternate ventilation path. The firefighters began controlled ventilation while the generator continued powering essential systems. The monitors were checked again. Readings dropped. No resident showed signs of exposure. The nurse still documented Helen's oxygen level and checked her for headache or confusion. I am irritated, Helen said. That is not one of the symptoms I asked about. It remains the strongest one. The nurse smiled and wrote down the actual readings. Dennis came to them after the fire department declared the occupied area safe. His hair had lost some of its usual order, and his notebook pages were damp near the edges. The secondary intake was on the seasonal inspection list, he said. It was marked clear last week. Owen looked toward the windows, where wet snow now struck the glass between gusts. Last week it probably was. Dennis nodded. The checklist did not account for debris shifting after inspection. That changes today. He looked at Helen next. The trial is suspended for the morning. Helen's mouth tightened. Suspended, Dennis repeated, not failed. His gaze moved to Pip. She followed the practiced sequence when the concentrator alarmed. She remained under your control during relocation. Most of the time, Helen said. Dennis almost smiled. Most plans are written for most of the time. Owen expected himself to feel vindicated. He did not. The trial had worked because Helen had remembered the cue. The nurse had handled the oxygen equipment. Pip had found a person. Dennis had used his authority. The maintenance worker had followed the exterior procedure, and the firefighters had confirmed the danger with instruments. Owen had recognized one smell. That was all. For once, all was enough. By early afternoon, residents had returned to their rooms. The fire department left monitoring instructions, and Dennis ordered an immediate review of every exterior intake. He did not approve Pip's return to Helen's apartment. He scheduled a second supervised trial after the ventilation work was completed. Helen accepted the decision. I would have argued more before today, she told Owen as they waited for the shuttle. What changed? I saw how many people had to do their part. Pip sat beside the walker, her right ear folded with fatigue. Helen rubbed the top of her head, including this one. Owen drove back to the workshop through roads scattered with branches. The wind had weakened, but the water below the ridge remained rough and gray. Mabel opened the north door before he reached it. How did she do? She asked. Pip pulled toward the entrance, eager now that the building was familiar. Good enough to matter, Owen said. Then he saw Ranger. The old shepherd lay on his padded mat in the same place where Owen had left him. His head lifted when Pip entered. His tail moved once against the floor. Pip hurried to him, stopped before crossing his front legs, and lowered herself beside the mat. Ranger tried to rise. His front paws found the floor, his shoulders lifted, his hindquarters did not. Owen was beside him before the second attempt. Easy. Ranger looked past Owen toward Pip. The puppy touched her nose to the back of Owen's hand. Then she turned toward the old shepherd. Owen lowered himself onto the concrete between them. Ranger had not been in Helen's apartment. He had not heard the alarm, smelled the exhaust, or seen Pip complete the task. But something he had practiced in a noisy workshop had held together when he was no longer there to demonstrate it. Owen placed one hand against Ranger's chest and felt the tired rhythm beneath the fur. You taught her, he said quietly. Ranger's eyes stayed on Pip. This time he did not try to stand again. On Friday morning, Owen began a new page in the notebook he normally used for engine faults. He drew 5 columns: food, water, standing, sleep, pain. Lena Ortiz had asked him to record what Ranger could still do without help, not what Owen could make possible with lifting, coaxing, medication, or patience. The distinction irritated him. It also frightened him. At 7, Ranger ate 3 bites of softened food. Owen wrote down all 3. He did not write that the old shepherd had turned away from the bowl twice. The workshop was quiet after the storm. Pip slept in the open wire crate, one pale paw across the threshold. Ranger lay near the north door, where he could see the gray strip of water beyond the glass. When Owen touched the leash, Ranger lifted his head. That counts, Owen said, marking the column for standing. Ranger did not stand. Owen waited, then slipped the support sling beneath his hips and helped him outside. That evening, Lena came in her navy raincoat. She listened to Ranger's heart, checked his gums, and watched him struggle to settle on the mat. "The medication is helping his breathing," she said. "It is not giving him strength back." "He ate this morning." "How much?" Owen showed her the notebook. Lena turned it toward him. "You wrote the bites. You did not write the refusals." "He ate eventually." "That is not the same measure." She sat on the floor beside Ranger. "I am not asking you to decide tonight. I am asking you to record the day he is having, not the day you want to preserve." She adjusted one medication and left instructions. No long walks, no training demonstrations. Help him outside only if he asked. Call if he could not settle, stopped drinking, or showed pain at rest. Owen followed every instruction. He also negotiated with each one. When Ranger refused breakfast on Saturday, Owen warmed it, added broth, then offered a piece from his hand. Ranger accepted 2 bites. Owen marked food.
Mabel arrived before noon and found him sitting on the concrete with the bowl between his boots. "He ate," Owen said. "1 bite?" "2. Mabel removed her mustard coat. "I can keep Pip this afternoon. You stay with him." "I can manage both." "I know. That was not the offer." Owen almost refused. Then Pip ran toward the hanging chain, corrected herself, and returned to Ranger's mat without being called. He handed Mabel the olive leash. 3 hours. "I do own a clock." After they left, Owen sat beside Ranger near the north door. The old dog did not need food, water, or another blanket adjustment. That was difficult for Owen. He checked each one anyway until Ranger opened an amber eye and exhaled through his nose. Owen stopped moving. They remained there until the windows darkened. Helen came with Mabel on Sunday, carrying coffee and no advice. She wore her burgundy quilted coat and used the walker inside because the floor near the entrance was slick.
"I thought I might sit for a while," she said.
The only chair was buried beneath tools. Helen locked the walker and sat on its seat.
"I brought my own."
For nearly 20 minutes, no one spoke. Mabel took Pip outside. Helen watched Ranger rest. Owen made coffee and placed a mug near her hand. "Thank you," she said. It was the first thing she had accepted from him without checking whether a decision came with it. On Monday, Ranger had a better morning. He drank without Owen holding the bowl. When Pip carried over the frayed rope toy, she stopped a foot from the mat instead of climbing over him. She lowered herself and pushed the toy forward with her nose. Ranger leaned toward her. His muzzle touched Pip's forehead. Then he looked at Owen. The moment lasted only seconds. Pip did not understand it as a farewell. Ranger was not appointing her to anything. 2 dogs who had shared a room and a routine were acknowledging each other in the way available to them. Still, Owen felt hope rise too quickly. He wrote better beneath the date. That afternoon, he called Lena and asked whether the medication change had begun working. "It may be helping," she said, "or he may be having a better day." "What is the difference?" "Whether you make tomorrow prove something." By Tuesday, Ranger needed the sling just to change position. He drank only when Owen held the bowl near his mouth. His right rear leg trembled even while he lay still. Near midnight, he tried to stand, failed, and made a low sound Owen had never heard from him. It was not a bark. It was pain without enough energy to hide itself. Owen reached for the notebook, then stopped. For years, records had helped him control machines, repairs, weather windows, and risk. If something failed, the numbers showed where to begin. Ranger was not a failed system. Owen closed the notebook and called Lena. She arrived before dawn. Mabel came because Owen asked her to bring Pip. Helen arrived after sunrise in the residence shuttle, carrying clean towels Owen did not need. No one entered without being invited. Lena examined Ranger and gave him medication for pain. When his breathing eased, she sat beside Owen on the floor. "We can change the dose again," she said. "It may give us more hours, possibly a day." "Will he stand?" "Not on his own." "Eat?" "Maybe a little." "Will he feel like himself?" Lena paused.
not in a way he can use. Owen looked around the workshop. Ranger's leash hung from its hook. The support sling lay folded beside the mat. The purchase offer for the building remained in the workbench drawer. He had spent the week defending each remaining ability as if enough small victories could rebuild the dog who had once searched dark rooms beside him. He had called assistance independence. He had called endurance comfort. He had treated one good morning as an argument against every hard night.
What happens if I wait?
You may get another quiet hour, Lena said. You may also get another night like this one. I cannot promise which comes first. Owen rested a hand against Ranger's chest. The heartbeat beneath the golden and black fur was fast and uneven. Years earlier, during his time with the island's marine rescue team, Owen had ordered a damaged boat to turn back while a fisherman remained beyond reach. The decision saved the people already under his care, but Owen had spent years believing that stopping meant abandoning someone. Since then, he had mistaken refusal to stop for loyalty. Now Ranger needed something different. Owen looked at Lena. Here. She nodded. He asked Mabel and Helen to stay. Helen moved her walker closer but did not touch Ranger until Owen placed the old dog's head in his lap. Pip settled near Ranger's front paws. Lena explained each step. The first medication allowed Ranger's body to relax. The tension left his hind legs.
Owen rubbed the thick fur behind his left ear, careful of the small triangular notch.
You did your work, Owen said. Ranger's amber eyes moved toward him. You stayed after the work was over. Rain began softly on the roof. You found her, Owen said, glancing at Pip. You kept calling me back when I did not want to be called. Ranger's muzzle rested against his arm. Owen did not tell him to stay. When Lena administered the final medication, Owen kept one hand beneath Ranger's jaw and the other over his chest. He felt the breath grow softer, then stop. No one spoke for a while. Pip moved closer and sniffed Ranger's muzzle. Lena gave her time. Then Pip stepped back and sat beside Helen's walker. Owen remained on the floor. Mabel did not tell him to rise. Helen did not offer comfort large enough to become a demand. Lena packed her instruments quietly. Eventually, Owen looked toward the workbench. The purchase offer remained in the closed drawer.
The training log for Helen's program lay on top of it, waiting for Dennis's final review. Ranger was gone. The responsibilities that had formed around his last winter were not. Owen placed the notebook beside the mat, open to the final page. For the first time all week, he did not add another mark. For 3 mornings after Ranger died, Owen unlocked the workshop before remembering there was no medicine to prepare. The first morning, he still reached for the pill container beside the stove. The second, he carried the water bowl halfway across the floor before stopping. By the third, he left both objects where they were and opened the workbench drawer instead. The purchase offer lay beneath Helen's training records. The buyer wanted an answer by Friday. Owen stood over the papers in his faded green camouflage shirt, one hand resting on the drawer. Selling the workshop would remove the empty mat near the north door, the hook holding Ranger's leash, and the marks worn into the concrete by years of the old shepherd turning in place before lying down. Keeping it could become another kind of refusal. He closed the drawer without signing anything. Pip arrived with Mabel shortly after 8. The puppy entered at a run, slowed when she reached Ranger's mat, and moved around it rather than across it. No one had taught her to do that. Mabel removed her mustard raincoat and hung it beside Owen's canvas jacket. "How long are you planning to stare at the same carburetor?" she asked. "I'm working." "You've had the wrench in the wrong hand for 5 minutes." Owen looked down. She was right. Pip carried her rope toy to the center of the floor, dropped it, then glanced toward the north door. She no longer searched every corner for Ranger. She still checked the places where he had usually been. Owen understood the habit.
Dennis Hale had scheduled the final review of Helen's plan for Monday. The residents had repaired the damaged windscreen near the generator, cleared the secondary intake, and added an inspection after every major wind event. The fire department had reviewed the revised procedure. Pip's second apartment trial had also been completed without incident.
She had stayed beside Helen's walker, ignored the oxygen line, stopped at the front door, and found a staff member after Helen gave the practice signal. The dog had met the training goals. The question was whether the people had built enough support around her. Owen spent the rest of the week finishing an outboard repair he had delayed during Ranger's final days. He worked in shorter blocks than before. Mabel took Pip to Helen for practice in the residence courtyard. Lena sent updated vaccination records. Dennis requested one final schedule listing who would care for Pip during Helen's medical appointments or any period when her breathing worsened. None of the work felt dramatic. That was why it mattered. On Thursday afternoon, the broker handling the workshop sale called again. "The buyer needs a decision," she said. "The current offer expires tomorrow. They may still be interested later, but I can't promise the same price." Owen looked through the window toward the tidal road. Spring had begun loosening winter's grip on the island. The ditches still held water, but small green shoots showed beneath the alder trees. "I'm not signing tomorrow," he said. "Are you rejecting the offer?" "No." A pause followed. "I'm delaying a decision until the end of August." "That may cost you the buyer." "I understand." "Do you want me to take the property off the active list?" "For now." When the call ended, Owen wrote August 31st on the workshop calendar. He did not circle it. He did not tear up the offer. The choice was neither permanent nor painless. It was simply long enough to finish what he had already promised without pretending grief had given him perfect clarity. On Monday, Helen sat at the conference table in the residence with Pip at her left side. The puppy wore her pale blue collar and short olive leash. Her right ear folded whenever she looked toward the hallway. Dennis opened his blue notebook. Mabel had provided a weekly transportation schedule. Owen had agreed to visit 3 times each week during the transition. A licensed pet care service on the island had accepted the emergency backup role. Lena's clinic held the medical records and would notify Helen when vaccinations or examinations were due. Helen remained responsible for feeding, daily walking, medication if ever needed, and reporting any change in her balance. Dennis reviewed the documents without rushing. At last, he removed his glasses and cleaned them with the familiar square of cloth. "I am approving a 60-day trial residence," he said. Helen did not immediately smile. "With what conditions?" "Pip remains leashed in common areas. The support schedule remains active. We review any fall, near fall, or repeated loss of control. We meet again after 30 days and at the end of 60. And if my health changes? We reassess with you." Helen's fingers rested on the walker handle. "With me," she repeated. "Yes." She looked down at Pip. "Then I accept." Dennis signed the form and passed it across the table. Owen did not reach for it. Helen signed her own name. That evening, Pip returned to the apartment where she had first lived. Mabel carried the dog bed. Owen brought the wire crate and a bag of food. Helen directed where each item should go. "The crate belongs near the kitchen wall," she said. "It gives her less room to turn there," Owen replied. "It also keeps her away from the oxygen concentrator." Owen examined the space. Helen waited. "You're right," he said. "I will try not to make it a habit." Pip walked through the apartment on leash. She inspected the kitchen table, the bedroom doorway, and the window where the shuttle could be seen passing below. When she approached the oxygen tubing, Helen gave the practiced cue. "Leave it." Pip turned away and sat. Owen gave no instruction. He only marked the success in the log. Before leaving, he checked the crate latch twice. Helen noticed. "It closes," she said. "I know." "You checked it yesterday." "I know." She rested one hand on the walker.
"You may go home, Owen." The word home landed differently than it once had. He left Pip with Helen. The workshop felt empty when he returned, but not abandoned. Pip's food dish was gone. Her rope toy was gone. Ranger's mat remained near the north door because Owen had not yet decided what should happen to it. He did not need to decide that night. 2 weeks later, Owen drove to the Marine Rescue Station for the first time in years. He did not volunteer for a boat crew. The station coordinator had called about a diesel engine that kept losing power under load. Owen agreed to inspect it on land. He found a clogged fuel line, worn seals, and a maintenance log that skipped 2 required checks. Instead of repairing everything alone, he called the younger volunteers over. "Show me how you would isolate the problem," he said. One volunteer reached immediately for the fuel pump. Owen stopped him.
Test before replacing. He demonstrated the pressure check, then stepped aside while the others repeated it. When one man made a mistake, Owen let him correct it rather than taking the tool away. The engine ran cleanly before sunset. The coordinator asked whether Owen wanted to return the next week to review the station's generators. "Maintenance only," Owen said. "For now? For now." It was not a return to the sea. It was a return to useful work without placing every outcome on his own shoulders. At the residence, Dennis revised the pet review policy. The safety requirements remained, but residents would now be invited into the process before warnings became deadlines. The form asked what support the resident wanted, what risks they recognized, and who should participate in the plan. Dennis showed the revised page to Helen. "You added 3 questions," she said. "I removed 6. Then progress is measurable." The repair near the generator became part of the permanent maintenance schedule. After high winds, staff inspected both the exhaust area and every exterior air intake. The change did not erase the mistake. It reduced the chance of repeating it. By late April, Pip had spent nearly 4 weeks back with Helen. She was still a puppy. She stole one sock from Mabel's laundry bag, barked at a decorative wooden duck in the lobby, and once forgot every lesson she knew when a squirrel crossed the courtyard. But she no longer cut in front of the walker. She waited at doors. When Helen's breathing worsened during a cold morning, Pip remained beside her while Helen called the nurse herself. Owen continued visiting 3 times a week. Some days he worked with Pip, other days Helen told him no training was needed, so he repaired loose cabinet hinges, adjusted walker brakes, or replaced worn handles around the building. On the last Thursday of April, he was changing a door handle in the common room. Helen sat near the window, checking the gauge on her portable oxygen cylinder before their walk. She traced the tubing with her fingers, made sure it was clear, and secured the carrier beside the walker. Pip waited beside her. Outside, a delivery truck backed toward the service entrance. Its warning signal sounded through the glass. Pip's head lifted. Months earlier, the noise would have sent her behind Owen's legs or racing toward the door. Now she turned, crossed the small space, and touched her nose to the back of Owen's hand. Then she looked toward the sound. Owen studied her. The left ear stood straight, the right remained folded at the top. Her pale front paw lifted once, then settled. She was not Ranger. She did not carry his years, his discipline, or the history that had passed between an old working dog and the man beside him. She did not need to. Owen placed his hand on Pip's head. "All right," he said. "Lead the way." Pip moved toward the door, then stopped. She looked back at Helen. Helen stood carefully, checked the brakes, and took hold of the walker. Pip returned to her correct position beside the left wheel. Owen opened the door. He did not take the leash. Helen led Pip outside. Owen followed them into the mild spring air, not because an alarm had sounded or because someone had ordered him into motion. This time he went because there was still a place for him among the living. Some losses leave a space that no one else can fill. But as Owen learned, moving forward does not mean leaving love behind. Sometimes grace appears quietly, in a new responsibility, an open door, or one small life reminding us that our own still matters.
May you find peace in what you have loved and courage for whatever is still waiting ahead. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, hope, and the quiet strength to begin again.